Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Planned operations are cancelled to free up beds as A&E departments struggle to cope with a surge in demand. The Aberdeenshire village that's been partially cut off by a landslip. There's still no end in sight for the residents of Gardenstone following the recent bad weather.
Debris is so wet and there's a lot of movement on it, and I didn't see a quick term solution, to be honest.
Also on the programme, the V&A Museum on Dundee's waterfront opens its doors later this year. Will it boost the city's economy? The father of footballer Dean Shields condemns fans who threw fake eyeballs onto the pitch. He says his son, who's blind in one eye, faces abuse every week. And wetting the baby's head, celebrations at the Highland Wildlife Park as they welcome the first polar bear club to be born in the UK in 25 years. Good evening. Planned operations have been cancelled in some parts of Scotland to free up hospital beds as A&E departments struggle to cope with increased demand. New figures show nearly 1 in 5 patients had to wait longer than 4 hours to be seen at accident and emergency departments in the run-up to Christmas. Here's our health and social care correspondent, Shelley Joffrey.
Accident and emergency in Wishaw, like everywhere else, has been feeling the pressure over Christmas. NHS admin workers have been drafted in to support clinical staff, and managers have appealed on social media for all but the most urgent cases to stay away.
We have GP surgeries open, we've got pharmacies open, so if you're feeling unwell, please go there first before calling NHS 24.
There have been more people turning up to A&E over the festive period, but the big problem is they've also been sicker with flu and respiratory illnesses, meaning they have to stay in hospital for longer.
To free up beds, NHS Lanarkshire has cancelled all planned operations, at least until the end of the week, maybe longer.
If influenza is really taking off, then that could be here for a number of weeks yet. So we really have to prepare for that eventuality, but obviously hope that things will recover quicker than that.
The new Royal Infirmary in Dumfries and Galloway just opened last month, cancelled outpatient clinics and routine operations today. NHS Grampian also cancelled 14 operations last week. Yvonne Osborne found out just how bad the situation is at Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary last week when her son needed a CT scan for suspected meningitis. When her GP rang ahead, she was told there were 50 patients waiting and they should go elsewhere.
Understand that accident emergency is accident emergency for a reason, but when you don't know what's wrong with someone, you want them to be seen as quickly as possible. You don't want to have to drive an hour across Edinburgh or an hour to St John's or an hour to wherever to receive medical treatment.
New figures show Edinburgh Royal failed to see a third of its patients within 4 hours in the run-up to Christmas. The Scottish Government says demand across the country has been exceptional.
Inevitably what happens is that these people who are much iller tend to spend longer time in hospital, and I guess individual boards are then making decisions as to what is the safe balance to maintain in terms of being able to manage this exceptional increase in the emergency activity against those planned procedures that they were going to go ahead with.
And Shelley is with me now. So Shelley, there's been no blanket suspension of routine operations here like there has been in England.
No, as the Deputy Chief Medical Officer said there, it's being left to individual health boards to make those sorts of decisions. But we have learned of 2 more health boards that have cancelled planned operations, NHS Fife and NHS Lothian. And of course we know Lothian has had particular problems since it was revealed they were underreporting waiting times. We heard in the film there of long waits at Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary. I spoke to another man who went to St John's Hospital in Livingston between Christmas and New Year, and he was told the waiting time there would be 8 hours. So there's been no blanket decision to cancel non-urgent operations across Scotland, but it is clear that the health service here is really starting to feel the strain.
And why is this happening? Is it simply that more people are turning up to A&E departments?
Well, that's part of the story. The new figures that we saw today only cover the period up to Christmas Eve. But speaking to health boards across the country, it's clear there's not just been an increase in people turning up at A&E, but in the complexity of the cases. There's been more flu and respiratory illnesses and, of course, the dreaded norovirus. And patients, especially the elderly, are staying in hospital longer, which means then there's difficulty freeing up beds for A&E admissions. So when we see the performance figures for A&E covering the festive period, which will be published next week, I don't think there'll be any surprises if they have actually slumped further.
More from you then, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Shelley. Protests against a rise in rail fares have taken place at a number of stations across the country. The RMT union demonstrated at locations including Glasgow Central, Edinburgh, Berwick and Dunbar. The protests come in the week ScotRail fares have increased by an average of 3.2%. Train operators say the higher fares will lead to increased investment and better services. An Aberdeenshire village remains partially cut off by a road following a landslip. Access to the lower half of Gardenstone has been restricted for more than a month amid fears over safety. The recent wet conditions have led to further slippage. Rachel Bell reports.
The winter weather has taken its toll on the Gardenstone coastline. For most of the past month, a landslip has cut off half the village by road.
People haven't been able to bring their vehicles down, which means that they can't easily get out of the village. They've got to walk a long way up. This obviously it affects some people more than others. It affects the elderly folk a lot. Ambulances and fire appliances can't get down to the bottom if anything should happen.
The road closure has also had an effect on the fishermen who work out of the harbour.
Just under the slide is where my store is, where I keep my gear, and the road is blocked to that. I can't get there with my truck either. I have everything to carry out past the roadblock. At the moment, I didn't see, and I didn't think they see a solution either. It's just the brae is so wet and there's a lot of movement on it, and I didn't see a quick term solution, to be honest.
Although beautiful, this coastline is vulnerable to the elements.
There is fears. I mean, the whole of the coastal community, all the way along the coast, Crivy's been closed for 2 months, and it's going to be closed for at least another 2 months. There was a slip in Pennon a few years ago, which took quite a long time to solve itself. There's been slips in the other direction in Whitehills and Portnocky. The whole of this coast is affected by the wet weather, and it needs a bit of finance into the infrastructure.
Most of the slips happen on private land, making prevention difficult.
There's very limited levers that the council can use there. Obviously these slopes are very steep, as you'll have seen when you toured about, and they can become unstable. I'm not sure there's very much more we can do. I think it will always be a reactive issue to try and then protect the roadway and protect people going about their daily business.
The council says consultants will be on site this week to review the situation.
It's hoped the road will reopen for a short time tomorrow to allow bins to be collected and to allow fuel supplies to be delivered to the homes below. But after more than a month, a more permanent solution is still to be found. Rachel Bell reporting Scotland, Gardenstone.
A security worker has been assaulted with a machete in the east end of Glasgow. 2 robbers attacked the 60-year-old man as he was loading an ATM at the Forge shopping centre last night. They made off with a 5-figure sum of cash in a stolen car, which was later discovered burned out. The victim was treated for a hand injury and is said to be in a stable condition. The Glasgow Underground is to become the UK's first unstaffed driverless train service. Strathclyde Partnership for Transport is planning the move for 2021 as part of a massive overhaul of the service. The operator says staff will continue to be employed and maintaining safety will be a top priority. The union representing underground workers has concerns.
Glasgow travelling public deserve to be consulted on their views in regards to driverless, ticketless, staffless trains and operations. What happens when something goes wrong? There has been no answers to this.
Police have named a pensioner who died after he was discovered lying seriously injured in a street in Dundee. 67-year-old John Ogston had suffered serious head injuries. He was found in the city's Hilton area late on New Year's Day, but died later in hospital. Police say his death is unexplained. They're asking anyone who saw Mr. Ogston on Monday night to contact them. 2018 is the big year for Dundee's V&A Museum of Design. The £80 million building on the city's waterfront is due to open its doors in the second half of this year. It's hoped it will attract hundreds of thousands of visitors every year, bringing a massive boost to both Dundee and the Scottish economy. Andrew Anderson reports.
The early morning sun catches Dundee's V&A Museum. The hope is this building will help bring a new dawn for the city. It's more than 2.5 years since building work began. It's been a challenging project for everyone who's worked on it.
I've never ever worked in a building like this before, and I'd be very surprised if I work in another building like this in the near future anyway.
The V&A is part of a £1 billion project to reconnect the waterfront with Dundee city centre, and this street will be one of the main routes down to the museum.
Good, and what would you fancy?
Businesses like this 1950s themed tea room are convinced the V&A will be good for them.
I'm a bit of a nostalgic person, like old-fashioned buildings and things, but it's really grown on me now, and it's there, and as I say, it's a wonderful monumental building and part of the city now.
The V&A will tell the story of Scottish design. This jewellery designer believes Dundee is its rightful home.
There are designers of all walks of life, all different fabrics, textiles, jewellery, sculpture, all over Dundee. It is a city of design, and I think that's why the V&A belongs here.
What's happening within these walls now is under wraps. In the coming months, the interior must be finished and the exhibits put in place.
I firmly believe that V&A Dundee is not only one of the most exciting cultural projects in Scotland, but it is also in the UK and I believe around the world.
The ambitions for the V&A Dundee are huge. It's hoped it will attract 500,000 visitors to the city in its first year. Until now, the challenge has been to get this building ready for them. Now the challenge will be to get them here and to keep them coming. Andrew Anderson reporting Scotland, Dundee.
The father of footballer Dean Shiels has condemned supporters who threw fake eyeballs onto the pitch during yesterday's match between Dunfermline and Falkirk. Dunfermline's Dean Shiels is blind in one eye and has been subjected to verbal abuse in the past from players and fans. His father Kenny says Falkirk will know the group of fans responsible. Brian McLaughlin reports.
A championship win for Dunfermline over fierce rivals Falkirk, but it's what the TV cameras didn't see that's causing outrage. These novelty eyeballs were thrown onto the pitch from a section of the visitors' support, mocking the disability of opposition player Dean Shiels. It was almost 12 years ago Shiels had an operation to remove his eye, having lost his sight through an accident at the age of 8. But it's not hampered his career, having played for Rangers as well as Hibernian and Kilmarnock.
I think Falkirk could have done better with it because they had an opportunity to put it to bed, and the chairman, they didn't do that. And they know the perpetrators. I'm confident that they do, and I would rather have seen them take action.
The matches between Dunfermline and Falkirk are known as the Kincardine Bridge derbies, and yesterday's championship fixture was classed as a high-risk game due to the intense rivalry between both sets of fans. But there have also been unsavoury incidents on the field of play. Earlier this season, 2 Falkirk players, Joe McKee and Kevin O'Hara, were suspended by the Scottish FA after being found guilty of verbal abuse towards Dean Shiels. Falkirk last night condemned those guilty, saying Falkirk FC apologises unreservedly to Dean Shiels and Dunfermline Athletic for the abhorrent behaviour of a small number of individuals. We will look to take action against anyone identified from today's game and will not allow this disgraceful behaviour to be repeated. And today, Fraser Wishart from the Players' Union also said, "We find it extremely difficult to understand the mindset of these individuals and are sure that the vast majority of Falkirk supporters will be appalled at this behaviour and the good name of their club being tarnished in this way. Nobody, however, should have to endure such abuse at their place of work, football pitch or otherwise." Officials from Dunfermline and Falkirk will meet tomorrow to look at CCTV footage in a bid to catch those responsible. The teams are not due to meet again until April. Brian McLaughlin, reporting Scotland, Falkirk.
You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. The NHS struggles as waiting time targets are missed, operations are postponed, and people are urged not to go to hospital unless it's a real emergency. And still to come, Highland zookeepers are delighted by the birth of the first polar bear cub in the UK in 25 years. Scottish firms are to be given the chance to supply items for the government's flagship baby box scheme. The boxes were introduced last August, aimed at giving all babies born here the best start in life. Businesses will soon get the opportunity to bid to provide some of the contents, including thermometers and changing mats. Laura Maxwell reports.
Preparing for the new arrivals of 2018. The new baby boxes provide newborns with somewhere to sleep, along with clothes, an ear thermometer and lots of other essentials to help ease and soothe those first vital 6 months. They're offered to all expectant mums, and so far more than 3/4 have taken one. That's more than 22,000 successful deliveries. And according to the Early Years Minister, the feedback has been positive.
It really is essential items, and I think particularly useful to those in a low income. But I do like the universality of it. It gets rid of any stigma associated with the box, and I think it's a very positive message to send out to the people of Scotland that we welcome and celebrate every baby coming into the world.
Does it look comfy?
Baby boxes were introduced last August, and although the scheme's in its infancy, it's estimated around 55,000 boxes will be distributed each year at a cost of £8.8 million. Now the Scottish Government says it wants to improve the economic as well as the social benefits of the boxes. Small and medium-sized businesses across Scotland are being urged to bid for the contract to provide the items which go in the box. The tender process will begin before the end of March. Laura Maxwell, reporting Scotland.
A pioneering scheme to teach science inside prisons is to be rolled out to jails across Scotland. The scheme, which has been named Cell Block Science by an inmate, is run by the University of St Andrews. It's been credited with encouraging more prisoners to join education programmes. Jamie McIver has more.
Lomas Prison outside Glasgow can hold some 800 inmates. Their time inside isn't just about punishment, it's also about rehabilitation.
They say things like, scientists have found that there's a difference between men and women in this behaviour.
The Education Service can help prisoners make the most of their life once they're released or discover a new sense of purpose. But it's often proved impossible to find an appropriate way to teach science inside a jail.
The subject of science conjures a vision of a mad professor with a Bunsen burner, with a gas lamp and scary chemicals. Obviously in a prison that's a difficult sell. Red, blue, purple.
But this pioneering scheme seems to be getting results. Staff from St Andrews University have been running science classes here and at 2 other jails.
Blue, brown, red, green, purple.
Today it's a demonstration of how the mind can process information. Try reading the word on the paper, not the colour it's printed in.
Purple.
Over the past few months, 35 researchers from the university have visited Lomas with areas of expertise from psychology to quantum physics.
We've had people explaining the nature of the universe to experiments on the mind. It's been fascinating. When they bring those lecturers in, finding out what research they're doing now is fascinating. Finished.
The early results are impressive.
We're getting requests for extra learning materials, which really shows an enthusiasm and a genuine passion for the subjects that we're talking about. And there's even anecdotal evidence of at least one prisoner who's now considering an OU degree.
Now a £150,000 grant from a charity will allow the scheme to extend to 6 prisons across Scotland, while St Andrews University believe this work helps them counter what they see as unfair criticism that they're an elitist institution. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland, Lomas Prison.
The Church of Scotland's first farming minister, dedicated to support people in the agricultural industry, has started work in Ayrshire. The Reverend Chris Blackshaw is on a 5-year mission to provide spiritual and emotional support to farmers and their families. Willie Johnson reports.
His parish is the rural hinterland of Ayr, his church equivalent, the local auction mart. The Reverend Chris Blackshaw comes here to see and be seen.
I have to get to know people, and importantly they have to get to know me, and before you can do any work or anyone will confide in you, there needs to be an element of trust.
Chris has performed similar pastoral duties for the farming community in Cumbria. His 4-year appointment in Ayrshire experimental and championed by the Kirk's local presbytery.
Farmers very rarely sit in a pew on Sundays now. Life has changed. There is no staff. They are very hard working, long working hours. And I could see a real need for someone going to them where they are at, so that the people could open their hearts and show their concerns.
How's farming treating you?
He's hearing about everyday crises of ill health and bereavement, but also industry-specific issues like the impact of a wet summer on crops and, by extension, farm income and viability, and the social isolation felt by people working alone and for long hours.
There's no doubt you've got problems and it just keeps building up, and you think, aye, there's no end to it, like, and it's no doubt having somebody to talk to right sure does help. Yeah.
The church is working in a new area here, thinking outside the box. It's going to where the people are, and it's meeting people where they are at their work. And basically that's what Jesus did. He went out into the community where people were, and that's what I do.
A minister tending his flock more literally than most. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland, Ayr.
The first polar bear cub in the UK in 25 years has been born in the Highlands. A resident bear at the Highland Wildlife Park at Kincraig near Kingussie gave birth within the last couple of weeks. The Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, which runs the park, described the arrival as an outstanding achievement, as Jackie O'Brien reports.
There were big bear hugs all round at the Highland Wildlife Park today as new dad Arctos celebrated by the pool. These first cries recorded by a keeper over the festive period confirmed that Victoria, the resident female polar bear, had given birth.
I couldn't quite believe my ears when she said that she'd heard a cub, and she'd managed to record it on her phone and played it back for me, and it was unmistakably a baby cub, so we were very excited. It's literally like all my Christmases have come at once.
It's unclear if there's more than one cub at this stage because staff can't see inside the sealed-off maternity den. But while its arrival in captivity has been criticised by the conservation group Born Free, others claim it has international significance.
We know that because of climate change and the shortened ice season, that this is causing negative impacts for polar bear populations. So the story in the wild is not at all positive. And so we want to make sure that we have at least an option to use the captive population to help the wild population.
As proud dad celebrates in style, there's much delight among visitors to the park here today that Britain's first baby polar bear in quarter of a century has been born here in the frozen north.
And it's here near Aviemore, so nice that we've got it happening in Scotland.
I think that's really cute. Love to see her.
It would make it even more special to come back and see once the cub's out and about.
But the public will have to wait for a glimpse of the newborn. Polar bear cubs have a high mortality rate in the first few weeks of life, and it's crucial that the animals aren't disturbed until they're expected to emerge in March.
We're not out of the woods yet, and so we do have to remain cautious. It's quite an anxious time for the keeping staff, and we're just very happy every morning when we maybe hear a noise.
The cub's father will be available for viewing, in between some compulsory head wetting. Jackie O'Brien reporting Scotland, Kincraig.
Ice in it too. Well, let's see if there are any suitably Arctic conditions for polar bears in the forecast. Christopher's here. How's it looking for the second half of the week?
There are indeed, actually. By this weekend, really quite chilly indeed. Thank you, Sally. Hello there, good evening to you. Still a number of hefty showers around at the moment for central and southern Scotland. But over the next few hours, those tend to fizzle and fade away to leave many areas dry, but cold. It will be a cold night, frosty, a few icy patches, a few freezing fog patches across parts of Grampian, And temperatures well below freezing in the countryside. In towns and cities not far off that. In the southwest, something a touch milder because thicker cloud here, and that's how we start the day tomorrow, with cloud and rain quickly spreading its way northwards, reaching the central belt by sort of mid-late morning. North of here, reasonably dry, still a few showers, and that really leaves us with a north-south split for tomorrow. So for central and southern Scotland, tomorrow afternoon, it's cloudy, it's wet, it's miserable. It's feeling quite cold, actually. Some snow there over the hills for all of us, though. Really, it's rain, and it will be a cold-feeling day. North of here, a bit drier. Some showers, though, through parts of Angus, Aberdeenshire, up towards Murray. Northwest of here is where we'll see any sunshine that's on offer. Probably quite limited, I have to say. Still a few showers for the far north. Orkney and Shetland faring OK. Some sunshine for you at times. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, that rain still with us, pivoting its way around. Some snow over the hills and mountains. Then, looking ahead towards Friday, low pressure nearby, but starting to get squeezed out by this area of high pressure across Iceland. And really, that's the theme for the weekend, with high pressure toppling its way in. But for Friday, still under the influence of that low pressure, a line of rain and sleet there through parts of the central belt. It could be a bit further north and south. We'll sort of keep up to date on that tomorrow. Snow showers in the far north. Elsewhere, some dry conditions. And then the weekend, there's the low, off it goes. There's the high, in it comes, muscling its way in and dragging in cold Arctic air with it. So a really cold couple of days for Saturday and Sunday. You can see on the air mass graphic the blue colours there. So Saturday and Sunday, cold, yes, but dry, sunny, crisp. One or two wintry showers perhaps around the east coast, and quite windy on Saturday, giving a bitter feel. Temperatures barely above freezing. Sunday, the winds are lighter, but it will be sunny. It will be chilly, but it will be crisp. So the weekend looking polar. Sally.
Thank you very much. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. Planned operations have been cancelled in some parts of Scotland to free up hospital beds as A&E departments struggle to cope with increased demand. New figures show nearly 1 in 5 patients had to wait longer than 4 hours to be seen at accident and emergency in the run-up to Christmas. Well, that's all from Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. From everyone on the team, the length and breadth of the country, that's it. Have a very good evening.